Hello, everyone. Eric Watson here, freelance writer, player of games, writer of words, recorder of videos, and tabletop role-playing aficionado. Welcome to my weekly behind-the-scenes, no players allowed live stream Crafting Annihilation, which I build, write, and prepare for our next session of Tomb of Annihilation. If you're playing characters Mannix, Kaless, Gillian, George, or Theron, do not come in here, for we have much to discuss. But for the rest of you, welcome. We stream our Tomb of Annihilation sessions live on YouTube every Friday evening. You can catch up on previous episodes on my YouTube page, as well as read weekly session recaps at roguewatson.com. If you would like to support the channel, please check out patreon.com/roguewatson. Shoutouts to my platinum patrons, Andrew, Richard, Joe, Will, Tiny Dancer, Nick, Andy, Grayson, and Chris. And gold patrons, RPG Papercrafts, Charming Grenade, Pretty Boy and Yuma, Marcos Did Vicente, Gilberto, Sean, A.K., Cert to be Adam, Dead Lizard, Lounge, Sam, Arash, and Lumpy Spuds. Thank you all very much for your support. Our campaign, we use Roll20.net. For streaming, I use Open Broadcaster software with Streamlabs. And for mental breakdowns, I use this stream. This is going to be a very special episode of Crafting Annihilation. Because I'm very nervous about the future. Just existentially, always, of course, anxious about the future. But specifically with how the Fane is going to play out. And I think much of this episode, I guess we could call it that, of Crafting Annihilation, is going to be a lot of hand-wringing over what to do about these troublesome players. D&D would go so smoothly if not for these troublesome players. No, I think that's a hole that DMs can fall into, which is you don't want to just if you want to write a novel, write a novel. If you want to write a story, write a story. D&D is not that. You are all participating in a game together, and the story I have in my head is not canon. It's not canon until the players get their hands on it and change things around. I think the problem is with too much of the Fane, I'm relying on my players working with me to make it, hopefully, a compelling story instead of a dungeon crawl. But my players like dungeon crawls, and I don't necessarily want to cheat them out of that if that's what they want to do. That would disappoint me as the DM, but I'm trying to come to grips with the fact that there's really no wrong answer for them, or at least I shouldn't let them have a wrong answer. I should always try to work with them. So I'm going to try to prep what I can, where I can, but much of what we're staring down the barrel here is how to react to what the players do, basically. I guess first we can start with my recap for last week's episode, which so last week was a little weird. Frankly, probably one of my least favorite episodes we've done yet for Tomb of Annihilation. I've had a lot where I come off of a week and say that was a great episode, one of my favorites. I've never had one where I come off and say, that was not a great episode. And I feel like this might be the first time that I'm actually doing that. Not necessarily because of the way things played out, but mainly because we had players just trickle in throughout the evening, and that really disrupted things. And the energy was really low because people were working late, I think, or something had happened where we had two different players come late, and one of them had told me they were going to be late beforehand. The other one I didn't realize until right before we were going to go live. And then I never know what late means, if it's 10 minutes, or it ended up being like 45 minutes, I think, 40 to 45 minutes. So that's pretty significant. So if you noticed, a lot of it was like us stalling and, trying to wait for them. So that part was really awkward. The leveling up definitely helps because we take some time leveling up. But on the other hand, that means when players show up, then we have to kind of go back and level them up. So it was definitely challenging for someone who is, running D&D, but also trying to run a live stream show at the same time and keep that energy level up. So that was a bit difficult for me, and I didn't feel like the players fully engaged with this major plan that they had to pull off because the fact that people were showing up late and maybe weren't 100% committed to doing D&D. That's all I'm going to say about that. In terms of how it played out with Ishmael, I enjoyed role playing that character. I hope it didn't come off as like mockery, because I really do. And Heather nailed it. I was absolutely trying to do Double Trouble from She-Ra, which is a really, really fun character who has those mannerisms and is just kind of a really fun spy type character. And I thought that was a great role to try to personify. So that was my goal there. I'm not sure if I was able to pull it off or not, but hopefully it was a fun character, because I was going to use that character quite a bit. And really, the players ended up kind of going with everything. One of my complaints about the mechanics of D&D is the illusion spells are always just kind of up to the DM in terms of how much you want the players to get away with them. When it comes to, there's like minor illusion is a cantrip, I believe, silent image at level 1. And I think there's another illusion spell at level 2, and then later on. So you kind of have to determine what all can the player really get away with. I mean, those descriptions do a pretty good job in terms of you can animate it and stuff like that, but does that mean it really looks, how well does that look? And are other enemies going to be suspicious? And this is a case of, well, the players are at least using a spell slot. They're using something in an interesting way. Should I just try and let them do it? And that was kind of what I was thinking here, even though I was looking forward to the challenge of legitimately doing the captive infiltration thing, which is stripping some of the players of their equipment, marching them inside, throwing them in prison, and seeing how they get out of this situation. But seeing as how the players were at least willing to go along with that whole plan up until, well, we're trying to get away from at least stripping us of our equipment, which is why I didn't try to capture the players in the first place, because I know one of the worst things you can do is capture your players and then strip them of all their stuff. Players hate that. I mean, I was a player and I would hate that. So I totally get that. The fact that they were at least willing to go along with this plan up until the point of, well, we're going to still hang on to our equipment. I was like, well, okay, at least you are using a spell. You seem to have a good way of doing it. It would be pretty challenging. I probably could have thrown some skill checks in there or some deception rolls. But we could say that they let Ishmael do the talking. They weren't really trying to fuck things up. Nobody was doing things out of the ordinary. They kind of, which on the other hand, the good news is they made it inside with flying colors. The bad news is it wasn't really that fun, because I basically was running the show. And this is, again, part of the problem with that session is I had kind of scripted a lot of stuff to happen and then expected the players to then modify that script. And they really didn't. And partly, I don't know if that was just, well, let's just go along with the flow, or if that was, well, we've got players kind of showing up late and nobody knows what's going on. We're just going to kind of sit tight and watch things unfold. So I don't know what combination of that it was. Maybe I had over-scripted things to a degree. But at this point, we've been playing so many years together, I kind of have a feel for how my players roll. And generally, they seem to respond better given a more structured framework versus okay, here's the area you have to get into. Now, how are you going to get in? So I gave them this structured plan, and then I guess the way they modified it was to use silent image to be able to get some of their the two captives inside. And I did expect Theron to use wild shape to get inside. In fact, I even hinted the fact they wanted to transform into a giant snake, and I was like, well, that's going to be very distracting. But if you transformed into a regular snake, that would totally be doable. And that was finally a good use of Theron's wild shape in terms of a non-combat form is, oh yeah, you can do this without having to be a captive. So what this means is the players are actually a lot stronger going into the Fane than I realized. Thanks, John. I appreciate that. And it does happen for sure. I don't keep up 100% with Critical Role or any of those sessions, but I'm sure they've all had their off days as well, and appreciate that. So the players are a lot stronger. They've all got their equipment. 3 of them are technically posing as Yuan Ti with Kales and Mannix. And I never had them roll deception checks yet because they never said anything. They let Ishmael do all the talking. So, on the one hand, that was probably the better play. On the other hand, maybe not the most interesting play for our point of view, me as well, watching things unfold. But it got them inside. So they played it. So basically, they played it smart. Listened to the NPC, did all the right things, so I let them get in without rolling any checks. That was my mentality for them getting inside. They didn't try to do anything out of the ordinary. They didn't antagonize anybody. I even maybe nudged a little bit of challenge with having them have to bribe the door guard, and they did it. They just like, yeah, we'll throw them some coins. So they didn't even try to challenge that. I fully expected Celeste to like use sleight of hand to try not to do it or fuck things up in some way that I would then force a skill check. But no, everybody was like, no, we're good. We're getting inside. So in that point of view, I was fairly impressed. On the other hand, they just kind of made it in. So, oh well. This is a full dungeon, which the party might not have been expecting. In fact, I believe George even mentioned the fact that he was going to like run on the rooftops and try to like even not be in that illusion. But then I had to stress, oh, no, you guys are going into an underground facility. And now they still don't quite know, although due to the magic of Roll20, they have a general idea of the size of this map. It's just all in black. So when they first enter, this is all they see. So you can tell, it's a pretty big area, but what you can see, obviously, is all of this, I guess we'll call it fog of war. So it's a giant dungeon. That part I can't really keep hidden because of they see the whole Roll20 map anyway. So that might change their strategy, but maybe not. As we have discovered, their plan going into it was to, at some point, I'm not sure when they figured this out, they're going to try to murder Fenthaza, who is the High Priestess of the temple and one of the main NPCs, and use Gillian's Mantle of Whispers ability to assume her form, and then like Gillian as the High Priestess, and then from there, it was like step 1, this, step 2, question mark, step 3, we win. So it's the step 2 that's the tricky one. However, this has a major problem, and I'll get into that in a second. So the party made it to the prison pits, unmolested. They shoved George and Gillian inside. They met Zendala. There was a brief sequence where they could talk to Zendala, and there wasn't really any big surprise. Like, yes, she was captured. I still want to get Zendala and Mannix together to have an important conversation, but Mannix didn't actually seem too interested in doing that at the moment, and it was a tricky situation because they're not really like in a scene where they can really talk together for too long. Like I had to keep kind of a mental note of like how many minutes and seconds are passing. And obviously they're being watched by all these guards. So I kind of pressed the matter of, and they were trying to figure out, okay, well, do we go in there now? They wanted to actually go in and murder the High Priestess when they were marching along in here. And I wasn't going to stop them, but through Ishmael, who was their current allied NPC, I had Mannix straight up roll like a persuasion check to persuade Ishmael to say, hey, help us get in the High Priestess's chambers and we're going to pull off this plan. And Mannix failed, and Ishmael was like, fuck no, we're not doing that. That's crazy, because as much as Ishmael can help them, they absolutely do not want to get into a fight. That is not the goal here. So I'm trying to tell the players through Ishmael, like, hey, you don't have to fight everything, even though that's, I don't know. I'm just worried they're going to get too murder hobo in here. So what I had a guard come in to the prison pits and basically say, all right, now we're going to, because this was my plan all along. After the players drop off the captives, I was then going to have them be summoned into Fenthaza's chambers. And there, Fenthaza is going to essentially tell them the overarching quest of this dungeon, which is which they already kind of learned a bit from Ishmael. What they didn't know is that Fenthaza is basically planning a coup of this entire area. And she will confirm that Rosnisi is sick and basically dying, and nobody knows why. The players might know why, and I'll have to think if I want them to kind of realize maybe what's going on, because the players know more about the rules of the death curse than anybody in the UNT would probably know. So I was going to have Fenthaza tell them Rosnisi's dying. It's bad for the UNT. I need to wrest control of this temple and oust him before he drags us down even further. And I'm going to use your help. And I was going to even have a stipulation where whether she finds out they are actually the party in disguise or not, she was going to recruit their help. If she doesn't find out, then she'll just tell them the plan. If she does find out, she'll be like, okay, well, you all need to prove your worth to me. go do some slave labor, which will, obviously probably upset the players. But then she will tell them, do the slave labor and then incite the slaves into an uprising, and we'll use that distraction and I'll go fight Rosnici. I'm trying to create this really cool political dynamic if the players want to play ball there. And I'd like to lay that on the players as soon as possible because their immediate plan is to murder her, eliminate the quest-giving NPC, and then have Gillian as her form, which has all kinds of complications for the players and for me, to where I am nervous as hell about this plan. And it has a mechanical problem because, actually, I don't think I can look up Mantle of Whispers here. I don't think I have access to Xanathar's in here. Do I, or do I? Let's see. Mantle. Oh, maybe I do. College of Whispers. I do have Xanathar's in here. That's right. I think I reviewed it at one point. So let's look at the fine print. At 6th level, you gain the ability to adopt a humanoid's persona. When a humanoid dies within 30 feet of you, you can magically capture its shadow using a reaction, and then you can morph into that person, blah, blah, blah. Here's the problem. Fenthaza is not a humanoid. Catch up on the chat real quick. Are you still considering having the doppelganger turn on them? So that's something I haven't actually talked about yet. That is in the book. That the doppelganger spy, the third paragraph says, Ishmael is secretly contemplating a defection to the Yuan Ti. If it shows any if its plan shows any sign of backfiring, I don't like it's, just they, use they. People aren't it. The doppelganger reveals itself to Rosnici or Sekalok and warns him about the intruders. So, not necessarily allied with the Yuan Ti, but I think that Ishmael is a survivor and would probably throw in with whichever group would be the better one. And most likely, if the players really fly off the handle and just try to go into this ambush mode on Fenthaza, I think Ishmael would side with Fenthaza. Not necessarily because they hate the players or anything, but because they think, oh, this is fucking crazy. I don't want to go down with you guys. I'm going to have to side with the winning side here. So kind of that interesting, in an animated film, it'd be like that kind of gray area, almost like a goofy, maybe villain sidekick or somebody that kind of switches sides left and right, maybe like a Gollum. I'm trying to think of a better example of that, but somebody who's kind of in it for themselves, not necessarily evil, but definitely in it for themselves. That's kind of where I see Ishmael. So Ishmael is their current ally, but certainly the players have done nothing to retain their loyalty in any way. So most likely, if they do something that Ishmael would not like, which would include murdering the High Priestess, then I think Ishmael would suddenly turn on them. Which a doppelganger, how strong is a doppelganger? Would that's so creepy. CR3, I would not let it have a surprise round. It only has a basic, it gets 2 melee attacks, 7 each. It's not that powerful at all, not big armor class or hit points. I mean, it would be a shock for the players to have to then fight Ishmael, but more than likely, what Ishmael would do would be to flee the scene and go warn the rest of the UNT, start the alarm, and that would really fuck things over for them. Change how you play things, how to react to players playing against Fenthaza. Yeah, sorry, I'm just now answering. It'd be a good way to give these explanation story bits about Rosnici, trying to recruit them. That will happen based on how you introduce Fenthaza using her guards. Right. I think this is going to be an absolutely critical part of the session, will be how I begin this scene and how it plays out. Because it's very likely the players will change their mind or won't, depending on what Fenthaza tells them. Follow me won't get the same response, as Fenthaza wants to have an audience with you before you speak to Rosnici to tell you about his current condition. All I've told the players so far, I believe, is Fenthaza wants to see you, and what she will do is basically congratulate them on capturing the PCs. She will question them on why do you only have half the PCs and how did you do it, which is 100% just a chance for the PCs to basically roll deception checks or come up with some bullshit. Now I'm worried that even if I start with that, the players are immediately going to be like, okay, we need to kill her because we're going to get found out. So maybe I need to actually lead with I may have I could have a good use for such ambitious and clever purebloods. But first answer me this, or something. I'm worried if I turn it into like a quiz, the player's gonna be like, oh fuck, we can't answer these questions. We're just gonna have to fight and kill her. I will try to deter the players by having the guards follow them in the room. I am going to do that. I guess I could just have the door open, but no, I think I want the guards to enter the room with her, which, because the player specifically said they want to try to fight her, things get crowded in here, though, isn't it? There's a lot of... If I put... Gillian's invisible, so Mannix and Theron would be like here, Kales here, Ishmael here. Maybe I'll just put like a guard at the door here. So one of the guards behind them, 3 of them. Gillian, I don't know where she would go. I guess she could just invisibly like sit on a pillow or something. But I definitely want to have the guards in that fight specifically to deter the players from just trying to do an ambush, because while, yes, they probably could kill Fenthaza in one ambush round, because God knows Kales can do obscene amounts of damage with a surprise round. I think if she gets a surprise round off, she auto crits somebody, which is fucking devastating. I mean, that is what assassins do. And right now, she does 4d6 sneak attack. So just for an example on her crit, let's see, what is that? 1d8 plus 6 would be her normal. And then 1, that's a pretty bad roll. 1d8, or no, sorry. And then straight up 4d6. Boy, I did really fucking bad rolls. Let's try to roll that again. All right. Maybe I should be Kales. That's only 20 damage, but with a crit, that would be 40 damage. So that is more than half her health with one character's attack in a sneak attack. So given that there are technically 3 other characters, Mannix, Theron as a snake who can, I guess, wild shape as a bonus action, do whatever he can, and then Gillian, I'm under no illusion that the players can absolutely murder this High Priestess if they ambush her. But I don't think they can murder her and 2 Malisons. And that will be hopefully the deterrent. They might be able to kill the Priestess, but even if I roll really bad for the initiative and they get 2 full rounds, I would be pretty shocked if they were able to kill her and the 2 Malisons, especially if I leave the door open and have one of them outside the door and one of them right here by the door. That would easily, and they saw, I mean, they know the layout here, they would easily see guards all over the place. So on the one hand, I appreciate that they have their own plan. On the other hand, please don't kill my quest-giving NPC. Fenthaza wants to work with you all. I can even have Ishmael just say, hey, keep cool, we'll get through this. And obviously that's a funny thing to say to the players. And awkwardly enough, they don't have George with them. George is still in the pit with Zendala. He is not manacled. He's basically free and has his weapons, but he would still have to get out of the pit. And then obviously there's a bunch of enemies in between him and them. So George would kind of be left out of this fight, awkwardly enough. I realize I threw the players probably too much of a bone by even having Zendala have that spell slot left of invisibility. I just thought that would be kind of a fun thing to give them as another tool in their belt, but what it did, it gave them this ability to then try and execute this plan, which I very much am not a huge fan of. Because I don't see them... Well, first of all, so we have to handle 2 things. First of all, Mantle of Whispers will not work on Fenthaza unless I just let it work on Fenthaza. So I have that to contend with. I'm pretty sure the players. And what's interesting is I even showed them what Fenthaza looks like via Ishmakal morphing into both her and Rosnisi while they were doing their introductory monologue. I thought that was a cool bit of showcasing Ishmakal's doppelgangerness by just morphing in, very much how Double Trouble does in She-Ra, just constantly morphs into characters, sheds skin like clothes. I thought that was very cool. And I specifically told them, described that when Ishmakal tried to morph into Rosnisi and Fenthaza, they couldn't quite get the legs right because a doppelganger is under the same rule that they can only transform into humanoids, and the two of them aren't proper humanoids, so they couldn't quite get that snake tail. So it just looked very off. I think the players are maybe just forgetting about the restriction, or maybe they just didn't quite get it. You know, we played D&D for years, but maybe they're not quite up on the mechanics and the specific things like Mantle of Whispers and humanoids. Maybe they don't realize that somebody who is literally part snake is not considered a humanoid. There's all kind of factors that they're probably not aware of. And as the DM, do I need to tell them that? Because I wasn't aware either. And at the end of last session, I didn't mention it. And then I looked it up, you know, in doing some research on this whole plan that they have, and thankfully having a session or a week in between, I looked it up, and immediately that was the first thing I realized was, oh shit, this only works on humanoids. Which Yuan-Ti purebloods and, oddly enough, these brood guards, which look very monstrous, are considered humanoids, which is interesting. But I think because the Malisons have literal snake parts, and the humanoid restriction means, well, I don't know. These guys are, I don't know. It's a weird thing. Mechanically, I don't know if brood guards should be human. That does not look fucking humanoid. This looks like a monster to me. That specifically doesn't make sense. The purebloods, it makes sense that they're humanoids. It does not make sense that these brood guards are humanoids. I think that might be just an error on Wizards' part. These guys look more monstrous than a Malison does, frankly, so that doesn't make any sense to me. So, I mean, if I wanted to, I could rule that Mantle of Whispers will work just to let them try and execute the plan, or I can tell them at the start of next session, hey guys, by the way, I looked up the rule of Mantle of Whispers and it says it only works on humanoids. Keep that in mind. And then they're going to, and I don't necessarily have to tell them Fenthaza is a humanoid, but then when they go in there, maybe they can either see the description or they can ask me, the DM, or make a check or something to realize that she is in fact not a humanoid and that plan is not going to work. You could hand wave an explanation that Fenthaza has already figured out who they are, and they could walk in to kill her, and she could say, "Congratulations, successfully getting inside." Ooh. Yeah, I could do that. That would solve some problems. Or create new ones. I hadn't even considered that. I could let Fenthaza know the players. I feel like there should still be a check involved. I feel like the players should still have a chance at deceiving her. Because I don't think she has necessarily any like mind powers. The way the doppelganger would be able to suss them out, because the doppelganger has those kind of mind powers. She does have spells. Don't she has like detect thoughts. It's actually all combat spells. It's a nicely built warlock. Arms of Hadar, Darkness, Fear, Hold Person, Hunger of Hadar, Witch Bolt, Invoke Nightmares, which is weird. It's just a single target. It's the phantasmal image, whatever spell that is. So I could do that. That would be an interesting deterrent. Vision from Dendar. Yeah, I mean, that's the bullshit hand wavy reason about why they know. Because I know. Dendar's told me of your plan. I don't know. I'm not opposed to it. it would solve the problem of the players thinking they've got the one-up on Fenthaza, or it might spark them to immediately attack her and be like, oh shit, she knows. Where I was going with it was to basically say, after giving the players a chance to role play, which I really hope they do, because I don't want to just have Ishmael do all the talking, is basically say, well, it's a shame you didn't capture the rest of them, because I would have a really good plan to use them as weapons against Rosnisi. And then I'm hoping the players would be like, go on, like, okay, if they were here, what would you say to them, kind of a thing. I really want to play with that a little bit more, because then she would tell them, well, but maybe you all could still be of use, and hoping to incite this rebellion and defeat Rosnisi. I would love for a chance for a role-playing scene with Rosnisi as well. The only problem with this whole setup about the players getting the quest from Fenthaza and learning everything about them from her is that it sets up Rosnisi as just being an antagonist and a challenge that they need to get over, whereas really they could probably just sneak in. I mean, the other option is ignore Fenthaza, sneak their way, or use these arcane portals, whatever other crap they want to use. There are multiple avenues for getting inside, but it's up to the players to really take the initiative on that. I can only tell them so many things. In fact, I think Ishmael did mention the portals before. I mean, they could just explore the Fane. They can do whatever, and I'll just react to it. I'm just trying to give them like an itinerary, basically, for in here, just to kind of help things along, rather than them just aimlessly exploring the area, but they could totally do that. Gillian is made from under the sea. It isn't a stretch for her race. Yeah, as I mentioned, the other option for Mantle of Whispers is I just let it happen. Like, I don't have to impose that restriction. I could just say, you can take on the form, and the other thing I thought of, too, is even if they realize that, she could still take on, 50% of the form, and then Mannix could use Silent Image to make it look like she's got the snake tail and like animate the snake tail. That would obviously not be a good long-term plan, but I mean, I'm still not sure what their fucking plan is for actually impersonating her. I'm kind of fascinated to see what it is on the one hand. So maybe I could let it, because even if I impose that restriction, they could still have that plan. Like, well, we'll go ahead and take her place, and we'll use magic. We'll use that same illusion magic to make it happen. But that's assuming somehow they win this fight without alerting the entire dungeon, and I don't see that happening. If I leave the door open, the guards are right there, they start a fight, Ishmael freaks out. I really don't see a way in which they don't sound the alarm and bring down the entire force of the UNT upon them, in which case I will fucking do that. If they go down that path and I've given them this many warnings, I will absolutely have all of these UNT brood. I mean, look at all this, all these brood guards, which individually are not crazy strong, but I mean, the priests right here, like, all this shit is going down, and I will drag all of them down to 0 hit points and throw them in prison, and then we've got a whole new, and now it really did capture them for real. So maybe I just let them start the fight, get themselves into a hot mess, because I don't see, maybe I need to peruse their spell list. They've got a plan that I'm not thinking of, but I don't see them being able to do this stealthily. I mean, if they shut the door and attack, there's still going to be a Malison inside that they have to contend with. I don't see them. I don't know. At some point, somebody's going to make a sound. They would have to do things very carefully and very well with a lot of really good skill checks to pull this off. And if they don't kill Fenthaza in the first round, they're fucked, because Fenthaza has an urn nearby that releases an air elemental. Which I could almost rule if somebody like knocks it over or something, it also gets released, because unfortunately I think she has to actually release it herself. But I do think that she will never even get a turn if they do decide to ambush and all attack her. Like I said, Khalees can easily do 40 damage on her turn. The others could probably do 30 damage. And assuming at least 2 of them get to go before her on the next round, I don't actually see Fenthaza getting a turn. So I'm not relying on her at all to actually survive that fight. But what I am relying on is for the players to suddenly have all the Yuan-Ti bearing down on them, and they have the dead priestess like right there. There's no way to get out of that. If you're going to tell them today, because otherwise you spend the first half hour planning and not playing. That is a good point. I could tell them ahead of time. I mean, I kind of did because I put it in my recap. That was a passive-aggressive way of me informing them. I don't know if they actually read all the recaps, but I did put it out there. But that's true. I probably need to make that decision and actually just go ahead and tell them in the Discord chat or somewhere. We actually have a Facebook group that we use. Like, hey, y'all, I read up on Mantle of Whispers and just saying, not saying you can't try and do something, but this is the... what I'll probably do is just copy and paste the Mantle of Whispers rules and said I would just pay attention to the rules on Mantle of Whispers, and they can interpret that how they may. One team might have been following the party. The only thing I don't like about her knowing is I'm not a fan of toppling my players' plans so quickly. Yeah, that's the other argument. It does pull the rug out from under the players, which I had initially given them, which was, hey, you're going to sneak in here and stealth, and they've done everything decently right so far. They're just on. It's just interesting because I have this plan right before they're about to royally fuck things up, and now I have like a week in between to try and figure out if I want to let them do that or not, and to what degree they fuck things up, I guess. Ideally, the Feign is not a dungeon crawl. It is a exploration and social and even like political maneuvering thing, which is a challenging thing to pull off, I think, especially for my group, which we kind of play D&D like a video game. You do you go into town, you get some quests, shopping. This one's different because there's not a whole lot of towns, and then you go into the dungeon and do the dungeon thing, just the JRPG core loop. And this is definitely a dungeon-looking ass dungeon, but it doesn't have to be a straight-up dungeon crawl with like room-to-room fights. And I think it works better if it's not, because we're about to go into a mega-ass dungeon, which is that. It's a bunch of death traps and combat encounters, and not a lot of social stuff. So that's why I'm trying to balance things out. Not every single room or area needs to have all those 3 pillars, but this area I really want to emphasize the social side of it, knowing that we're not going to have a lot of that going into the final dungeon area. We'll do a little bit more with the Red Wizards and artists and stuff. That'll be really fun. That culmination, Zendala. But then the actual Tomb of Annihilation itself is not going to have a whole lot of social opportunities, whereas this area could potentially have some awesome social opportunities, or the players could just start killing things and have it devolve from there. And I mean, it's in the rules where the Yuan-Ti absolutely will ring the alarm and send in all these different reinforcements to make a beeline. So I don't know. The player, I don't think they have like the silent spell. I'm trying to figure out like what options do they actually have that would allow them to defeat Fenthaza and not completely have all of the enemies upon them. I don't think they've got a lot of options for that. They don't have any more invisibility. What does Mantle of Whispers give? Let's see, I need to read the fine print on that. Because the other option is, I don't know what the players do. Even if they somehow manage to kill her without alerting everybody, where do we go from there? I don't know. Let's say you gain access to all information that the humanoid would freely share with a casual acquaintance. Such information includes general details on its background and personal life, doesn't include secrets. The information is enough that you can pass yourself off as the person by drawing on its memories. Another creature can see through this disguise, by succeeding on an insight check contested by your deception check, although you get a +5. I mean, it's a neat ability and it's a neat use of it. But I wish the party would have instead worked to isolate a single no-name NPC, dragged them into a room, killed them, taken that person's thing, and then used that. It just sucks that they are wanting to do, like, basically one of the most important NPCs in this building. And the one NPC that I was going to use as, like, here is your mission while you're in here. So if they kill her and take her form, now the party really doesn't know quite what to do about that. And I have to somehow... I mean, so Fenthaza would know... Well, I guess she would know how to get into Rosnisi's chamber. Let's see, because there's a secret door. I assume Fenthaza would know how to get in there. So they would know that info. Well, I don't know if she would share that with a casual acquaintance, though, because it does mention that. She would know how to work the teleporters, probably, but would she share that with a casual acquaintance? This is actually interesting. What is a casual acquaintance to the High Priestess? Somebody that you're gabbing with over the water cooler, which is not something she probably wouldn't spread too many rumors. She would know the layout of the entire dungeon, know about the slaves for under Isar, know that Rosnisi's dying. Maybe wouldn't necessarily know how to get into his... Maybe wouldn't share the fact that get into his chambers, but know that it has something to do with the throne room and there's a secret somewhere. I could probably rule that. So, I mean, that is an option. And then the players with Fenthaza somehow disguised with the rest of them could then make their way into that layer. George is still kind of screwed over here with Zendala. I mean, they still have to break them out somehow. Fenthaza would know about the Hydra and the escape room, which would be interesting because I specifically didn't want to tell the players about the back entrance through Ishmael because I was worried they would just decide to go back here. But they could learn about it as a proper way out, which I think would be awesome because then I can use the Hydra as a final boss, which would be also awesome. Because we had a Hydra in Princes of the Apocalypse and my players never fought it. If you watch our Princes of the Apocalypse campaign, the players, when they got to the water node dungeon, they made it down the right path. There's 3 paths down to the bottom. They went the right side path, defeated the boss, which is Aboleth, and then took like this weird like bubble Uber and went all the way up to the central and just skipped the Hydra, which was in the central path. So I never got to play with the Hydra, so that would be kind of a fun fight to be able to use. So, I mean, that could be an interesting thing. The players kill Fenthaza, maybe with Mannix's magical help, use her to gain knowledge of the area, but they still have to worry about the fact that assuming, well, Gillian would not have invisibility. She'd be as Fenthaza, which I think lasts until a long rest, so they would have that for a while. The rest of them would be, I guess, still disguised or trying to be disguised. There would still be deception checks involved with all of these things, and then somehow they would still have to free George and Zendala from their situation. So I'm not sure even how they're going to do that, because if they kill Fenthaza, that means Isar would report to Fenthaza to try and take the prisoners. It just it gets really complicated for me as a DM to try to work through that, because now they'll have to report to Gillian as Fenthaza. Disguise yourself. You should disguise yourself as a stormtrooper, not Darth Vader. Thank you. Thank you. That is a great analogy, Andy. I love that. Exactly. Exactly. How do I tell the players that? You should disguise yourself as a stormtrooper, not as Darth Vader. That is a great fucking line. That's perfect. That's exactly the problem. They're walking into this area, and I like the concept of like, okay, we need a better disguise, but I don't like the concept of like, okay, well, let's go murder Darth Vader in his chambers and use him as a disguise. Like, that's really complicated in a lot of ways. I think I'm leaning towards So I'm leaning towards telling them today, hey, everybody, you might want to refresh on the rules for Mantle of Whispers. And I think that's all I'm going to say. I won't necessarily tell them Fenthaza is not a humanoid, but maybe they can infer from there. If they have questions pre-session, if they just follow up and ask me that, I may just go ahead and tell them based on... Because again, they have seen her because the doppelganger tried to morph into Fenthaza. So based on that information, they would know that she is not a humanoid. I'm not necessarily saying they can't still do this plan, because as a DM, I don't think you ever want to just shut things down completely. You always want to say yes, but. So in this case, like, if you still want to try to kill her, you can certainly try. That's going to be real fucking hard to do quietly. And B, Gillian is not going to be able to fully assume her form. You're gonna have to use like Mannix's silent image, or somehow just keep her in the chambers, like covered up in pillows, and then try to operate from there. And I need to have contingency plans for all of these eventualities. Oh, it only lasts for an hour? Shit, I do need to read the fine print on this. I thought it was through the next long rest. Oh, you're right. Disguise lasts for an hour or until you end it as a bonus action. Oh, you just can't use it again until a short or long rest. Okay. Gotcha. So they're on a very obvious timetable then. If they even try to pull this plan off, they've got for an hour. Yeah, so I'm going to tell them, and if they still want to do the plan, they can. I will write down exactly, if they do manage to pull it off, exactly what Gillian would learn, which would be where they would know the layout, they would know where the portals are in each area. They would know that Rosnisi is dying, and they don't know why. They would know that his chambers are located in a secret passage in the throne room, but not necessarily know how to access them. And that's already a pretty good amount of information, I think. And the fact that there are caves that are being expanded by slaves over here, and that there is a way out, like an emergency fire exit from the Yuan-Ti temple down here in the caves. I think that's what they would learn. But maybe they'll stay a while and listen. Maybe they'll, maybe they'll accept Fenthaza's quest proposal, which, looking at my notes now, would be to tell them basically straight up, which, I'm kind of accelerating things a little bit, because obviously logically, she probably wouldn't immediately tell this to the players. She'd expect them to go back and mingle for a while. But I just think, like, narrative-wise, the players want to get things done. The longer they stay here, the more dangerous it is, and I would agree with that. So I would go ahead and have Fenthaza tell them, hey, you all, have proven yourselves to be powerful. I'm going to let you in on the coup that I'm basically planning against Rosnisi. And, she's been busy recruiting people to her side. He still has his loyalists. But, more and more of us are recognizing that Rosnisi needs to be overthrown, because, the Yuan-Ti do not tolerate weakness. And his sickness or disease is a weakness. And we need to get rid of him. And so maybe that will stay the player's hand. That's what I'm hoping. I'm hoping I can get all that dialogue off before they just jump the gun and murder her immediately. And she will convince the players, specifically, she will tell them, if you can help incite a prisoner rebellion, which again helps the players because that gives them an excuse to free their captive friends. If you can incite a prisoner rebellion, maybe when they're taking them down to help out in the caves, here's the the password to get into the storeroom and, incite a rebellion down there. Because Isar, maybe he's a Raz Nisi loyalist, turns out, or something. And then she will march over to Raz Nisi and fight him. And hopefully the players will want to join in on that fight. And then you've got this cool like UNT on UNT battle, and the players can either hang back or join in or however they want to manipulate things. To me, that is the way more interesting scenario. And then if, there's some complications on if Fanthaza wins versus if Raznisi wins. And it really depends on, especially if the players then maybe turn on the, if, for example, if the players then turn on Fanthaza and help Raznisi, then obviously he would be incensed to reward the players. And there's no reason the players have to even fight Raznisi, because if they can just explain the whole death curse thing to him and be like, hey, Sarek's fucking you over, man. It's his reason you're dying. Then Raznisi would be very amenable to like, oh, well, okay, here's the cube. Go destroy that for me. And also, if you could bring me the Black Opal crown, that would be great. Because, he wants to take over the world, which is an interesting little side arc that I don't know why any player would want to agree to, but there you go. Sure, I'm going to turn over this artifact to the UNT. Why not? What spells does the party have? What spellcasters are in the room? All of them, unfortunately. Theron, Mannix, and Gillian, because I gave Gillian invisibility, are all going to be in this room. So they've got some options there. But I don't think they have the right options for stealth. Trying to figure it out. I mean, Gillian is currently invisible. Anything they do is going to be the surprise round. All of her stuff is actually very loud. In fact, it's the opposite of stealth. She's got like thunderclaps and shit like that. I don't see any of these. Yeah, tidal wave. Like all this shit is big, loud, explosive stuff. What's really interesting is she took Dimension Door when she leveled up, and I'll be interested to see how she uses that to teleport around, because I think there are specific rules against teleporting in the Tomb of Annihilation, which now I'll have to be very aware of. What does Theron have? Also really loud stuff. Ice Storm, Sleet Storm, Conjure Animals. I mean, Pass Without Trace gives him a +10 stealth check, but I don't think that's going to keep battle quiet. None of these are particularly stealthy, friendly spells that I can see. Yeah, I get you. And that was partly what I was saying before is, I don't want to necessarily write my own story and then force the players to adhere to that. And I wasn't really trying to over prep for this session. And in fact, I have prepped very little of this session because and the Fane in general, because I'm just kind of waiting to react to the players. Whereas a lot of times I think the players are reacting to me doing things. My main concern here is that my entire quest arc for the Fane happened to rely on the one NPC that they are adamant about murdering. But, they could pull it off, and that could be an equally interesting story. On the one hand, I kind of want to see how that would work. If, and I could have... The bummer is I have limited time to prep for D&D every week, and I have to come up with all of these different scenarios now. It's like, okay, well, now I have to come up with a situation where if the players fight her and kill her, but also have all the UNT on them. And then I have to have a situation prepped where, okay, if the players fight her and don't kill her, and the UNT are all alerted and attack them. And then I have to have a situation where, okay, if the players don't fight her and accept her quest, and then I can prep that stuff. So this is the only problem right now, is it's such a pivotal crossroads of me having to prep wildly different situations. And it definitely does make it challenging from that standpoint. The one thing I am sure of is I'm pretty sure that if they decide to fight her, they will successfully kill her. Given her armor class and her hit points and the amount of damage the players can do, I think they would successfully murder her. I don't think they would be successful in keeping it quiet. Between Ishmael freaking out and and maybe they could probably roll something or just attack them before Ishmael can run away in fear. But the Malasans would be right there. I don't think they would be able to kill both the Malasan guards. And meanwhile, the sounds of battle are surely going to draw other things. And if Fenthaza somehow gets a chance to react, she is definitely pulling out that fucking air elemental, which is a bonkers, like, crazy thing that nobody's aware of, that she just has this air elemental in this urn sitting there, which I would love to release on the players and would immediately fuck up any chance they have of doing this quietly. I just don't see them pulling this plan off successfully without me having to bend all kinds of mechanical rules to let it happen, including the fact that Mantle of Whispers doesn't actually work on non-humanoids. Improv like a mofo. That is DM tip number 1. So yeah, it's going to be tricky. It's going to be fascinating. It's going to be interesting. I am going to let them know about the Mantle of Whispers fine print just to give them a heads up, because I do think that's fair, because I was right there with them in terms of I'd forgotten that it only works on humanoids. And you might not realize, especially given that brood guards are considered humanoids, there's definitely an inconsistency there where Malasans just happen to not be humanoid. So even though, like, the ones that have a snake head, I think, are also considered monstrosities, right? Even though that's... Yeah. This makes no sense that this is considered not humanoid and this is considered humanoid. That's dumb. But, okay. So I could bend the rules, but I'm using that as a slight... I mean, I think I'm gonna enforce that rule. I'm not saying they can't do the plan. They can still do whatever plan they want. But I will go ahead and tell them, hey, Mantle of Whispers only works on humanoids. Just a heads up. And then see where we go from here. If they still want to pull off the attack, they can do that. I will try to start my role-playing scenario with, I've been very impressed with you all. I may have a job for ones as ambitious as you. She will ask a few questions, like 1 or 2, and Ishmael will look at them nervously, and mainly just a way to get them to role-play, and yes, to roll some deception checks and all that, just because I feel like they need to do that at some point. If they're disguised as purebloods, there needs to be at least one deception check somewhere along the way. Maybe they'll feel like they wasted that invisibility, but whatever. It wasn't like they cast it anyway. And, you know, she's still invisible for an hour, so Gillian could still use that to just explore a good chunk of the temple. And once the purebloods once Mannix and Kaless and Theron, I guess, are dismissed, they will also be able to explore. My idea is, when I tell them about this coup that they want to incite, she doesn't want to do it until, like, the next day, specifically because I do want to give the players a chance to explore a little bit and, you know, fuck things up as they want and get the layout and just kind of have fun with the dungeon as disguised people socializing, you know, versus the room-to-room combat thing. And then they can basically get a short rest at the end of the day, and then the next... Because she'll mention, like, Yuan-Ti are most lethargic in the mornings or something. They take blood baths. And then she'll mention, this is when I want the actual coup to happen. And maybe the players will just say, okay, sure, and just ignore that and go and try to explore and talk to Rosnisi. That's fine, too. I'm really interested to see how the players do all that. So I'm going to give them this mission, but tell them, hey, this thing I want you to pull off is actually not going to happen until, like, the next morning, for example. And that gives a chance to, like, drag Zendala and George, you know, by the Slave Master and do all these things and have the players react and hopefully have all these cool shenanigans happen in between before we actually launch this big uprising and attack, which is also going to be kind of terrifying and complex in some interesting ways to showcase there's this kind of Yuan-Ti on Yuan-Ti battle going on with the players really deciding what they want to do from there. That's the story I want to tell, but of course, the players are more than welcome to jack things up to a pretty high degree in terms of ignoring that, or just freeing the slaves on their own, or just fighting people in a room. The only thing that really screws this whole thing up for me is if they murder Fenthaza and then they don't learn about any of that. But maybe they just incite the rebellion right then and there, or they just have Fenthaza just take all these troops and as Gillian and go attack. Like that could be a cool story too. There would just be more deception checks involved, and it would actually be harder, in my opinion, for the players to pull it off. But if that's where they want to go, I think that could be an interesting story too. So we'll see. Yeah, polymorph is only beasts. Polymorph is beasts only, and the Mantle of Whispers is humanoids only. Don't know if I think there's a high level, maybe like a shape shift ability. Maybe. Shape change. You assume the form of a different creature. Any creature with a challenge rating equal to your level or lower can't be a construct or undead. So that is a 9th level spell. That lets you transform into anything, assuming it's your CR level or lower, not undead or construct. It's a 9th level spell and costs a jade circlet worth at least 1,500 gold pieces. So it is not a fucking easy thing to do to transform into anything. Which is why the Mantle of Whispers only works on humanoids, because that is a 9th level spell that's expensive. How far yeah. I still think it's weird that brood guards are humanoid. They just look very monstrous to me. So that's pretty much all that is going to be for this week's Crafting Annihilation, which is what I anticipated. It's me fretting over what comes next and not actually doing much prep work during this scenario, because it's a lot of me that's typing out stuff going on. So I think the changes I'm going to make, I'm going to give the players a heads up on Mantle of Whispers, and I'm going to be more upfront with Fenthaza's initial dialogue to warm the players to the possibility that she wants to work with them, instead of immediately being suspicious and the players going, oh God, we got to kill her because she's going to find us out. So hopefully they'll take the hint and work with her a little bit before they try to assassinate her. And even if they do assassinate her, then, I'll work with that too. Well, I don't want to stop them from doing that. I think it's going to have some dire consequences, and I will be impressed if they come up with some clever way of doing it quietly that I haven't thought of. But we'll see. That's part of the magic of D&D, is seeing what the hell players come up with in this situation. Somebody mentioned, I will say this, in a YouTube comment, I don't remember who it was, but basically appreciated the fact that Kazan, which was my character in Storm King's Thunder, was the diplomatic one of the group, and kind of did a lot of that social role-playing and manipulation stuff. And this party, maybe sound like an asshole, this party doesn't have a Kazan. And this is something that Chris and I have actually talked about, literally while I was driving him back to the airport earlier this month. Obviously, we talk D&D a lot. And something he mentioned is like, man, the last 2 characters I've played, referencing Mannix and Kalinar, have been assholes, his words. They've been total assholes. And they've been fun characters, but I really want to play somebody who's just not a dick and just an overbearing, kind of selfish asshole. I guess Kalinar wasn't selfish, but he was very much inflexible. In terms of being that person who wants to engage with people and work with them to a degree. I guess Mannix will work with somebody who's shady, but so the party is kind of missing that person who's willing to kind of role play in that regard. So it's really been challenging for this. It hasn't been too challenging because we haven't had a whole lot of those opportunities in this dungeon, this campaign, given that they're in the jungle most of the time, and most things are trying to kill them. And the few characters they've worked with have been pretty shady, so maybe that's been an advantage and something I've had to work with. But that is kind of an interesting challenge for me as the DM is I really can't appeal to somebody who wants to work things out like the right way, sort of, in a way. Like it's, Theron will work with like beasts more than people. I feel like the last time the party really did that was maybe like Fort Belwarian. And as you recall, Fort Belwarian went horribly wrong. Granted, the players, this was a good example of letting the players fuck things up to a huge degree. Everybody seen that my players loved that whole scenario, and I think a lot of you seem to enjoy that one as well, because of how they absolutely fucked up their whole chances of getting in, which would have normally been a pretty easy thing for them to do. There was also a situation where I didn't just say, okay, well, you guys can't get in now. Instead, it just turned into a different thing. So Fort Belwarian is a great lesson of kind of how to handle that sort of situation where, like, man, you guys fucked things up royally, but here's like another path to get in and try to do things this way. So maybe this will be like Fort Belwarian in a way. Like, you guys fucked things up royally, but now there's still a way to complete this adventure. But in that case, it wasn't a dungeon full of Yuan-Ti trying to kill them either. So it's just a little more complicated, and I'm hoping it doesn't devolve into a fight, but I'm willing to let that happen. I'm trying to give the players enough rope to let them hang themselves on. And that could very well take place here. All right. I think that'll do it for this week's Crafting Annihilation. Thank you all for joining me. I'll be streaming some more Guild of Dungeoneering tomorrow. Hopefully that will go better. If you want to see a grown man just nearly rage quit that game, watch my Monday session. That game hit a huge difficulty spike that I was not a fan of. And then, of course, we will see what transpires in the Fane of the Night Serpent come tomorrow evening. And I'll see you all then for that.